So 9 Extinction Rebellion activists who smashed the windows of HSBC back in 2021 were found not guilty of criminal damage by a jury in a court. So the damage to the bank's headquarters is estimated to have cost £500,000 after the eco-activists took hammers and chisels to shatter the glass of HSBC's windows. I think we might have a little clip of this. That's like, it's not just me. Is that not criminal damage? I mean, apparently not. But is there actually then a two-tier justice system when it comes to climate activism? We have heard a lot, haven't we, about two-tier policing recently in light of the Palestine protest that we've seen. But is there also just a way that you can now convince juries that if your cause is, quote-unquote, worthy enough, then they will just find you not guilty? We saw something similar, didn't we, when the Edward Colston statue was dragged down. Those people were found not guilty as well. I'm joined now by Ed Gemmell, who's the leader of the Climate Party. Ed, look, thank you very much. A lot of people, myself included, are scratching our heads here as to how you could be found, not you personally, how one could be found not guilty of criminal damage when you... I mean, you've hammered the windows outside a bank.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick, when you start to look at it, obviously people were there, they were creating the damage. When it comes down to whether or not that is criminal damage and whether or not they are guilty under our legal system, that's a question for the jurors after all the evidence has been presented and after they've been directed by the judge. And the judge in this case did direct them and also directed them as to what a potential defence could be. The jurors, as I understand it, from the articles and that have been written about it, is the jurors requested additional evidence because they had to get all the evidence that they were going to decide the case on from that court hearing. So they asked about what the Paris Agreement, what the conditions of the Paris Agreement were. They asked about what the British government was doing in relation to climate change, and they also asked some information on HSBC. So they asked for all the information.
This is the point. This is the point, isn't it? Exactly. Look, this is the point that is fascinating. So there's no question about there being damage, but it is fundamentally up to the subjective nature of a jury on any given day to dictate whether or not they believe that damage to be criminal. And if Extinction Rebellion can make the case to a jury that the world is ending, we're not doing enough to tackle that, and that particular bank is, you know, nasty, horrible polluter or is funding pollution, therefore their action in that sense was not criminal, it was justified. And I find that very, very worrying because, well, that's what we've got the law for, haven't we? Try to take subjective things out of it. I mean, what next? What next? You know, I can be completely justified in doing absolutely anything I want. If I felt I would never do this, Ed, of course. But, you know, would it necessarily be criminal if I punched you over something, you know?
Right, I mean, would it necessarily be criminal if you went and attacked some cameras all around London? I mean, I don't know. These are questions that need to come to the jury after the evidence is given. So the police bring the prosecutions. Is it criminal to be dropping down black fabric over the Prime Minister's house? Now, the acts happened. We know that the Blade Runners smashed up the cameras. It's then up to the case to be brought before the jury, and we have the right to a trial by our peers since the Magna Carta in 1215. So it's quite right that our peers go out and then decide if we're justified in taking those actions.
But do you not think maybe there's a bit of fear, right? This is my point. Do you not think there's maybe a little bit of fear? So you're saying to a group of people who probably don't want to be there because they've been called up for jury service, that this group of people who are willing to smash the windows or potentially commit acts that many people regard as criminal damage, or, as well, during the Black Lives Matter situation where they tore down that statue of Edward Colston and dragged it into the water, there was a very similar situation there where the jurors know that there is potentially a mob waiting for them if they find this lot guilty. Do you not think this is kind of like Mafia tactics here?
I mean, I don't, Patrick. And to be honest, the other side of the argument where we will have to wait as well is the Blade Runners. So if any of them are brought in front of juries, what happens, and would anybody be worried about the mob in that situation? I don't think that is the issue. I think the jurors are there. They know they're going to have protection anyway of the police when they go outside. I don't think that's the issue. I think what you're more likely to see is the jurors there saying, right, these people say they committed that damage. because they believe that there is a huge damage being happening to the world, and it's being caused partly by HSBC and its investments. And they then have gone out and asked for information saying, right, how serious is that potential damage? You know, what's in that Paris Accord you've been talking about?
I just really don't get that.
What has HSBC done to actually make it worse? And they've gone and asked for that information. And then just like you or I, without being experts, they've gone and said, in my reasonable opinion, that's justified.
Only woke causes, only woke causes would win this, right? If I thought that I don't necessarily think this, by the way, this is just purely an example right off the top of my head now. If I thought the RNLI were helping to aid and abet human traffickers bringing people into this country, right, and I then decided to go and damage the boats of the RNLI, I would then have to try to convince a jury, would I, that my damage to those boats was justified because I think that they're putting money in the pockets of human traffickers and that they are potentially aiding and abetting a national security risk. I'll emphasise again, I do not actually think this. It's a purely hypothetical example, right? But that's the same thing, isn't it? And people, with respect, I suspect on your side of the argument, would think that was insane.
When you were talking about justified, the judge is going to direct them. Look, I mean, you know, I'm a lawyer a long, long, long time ago, and I'm not a criminal lawyer, so I can't say I know this in any way. But what's happening is the prosecution and the defence have played out their cases. People have made their statements to try and justify it. And the judge will then say to the jurors, right, this is my direction. These are the defences that are available. These are the things you can decide on. And the jurors go off and decide. So, and I do think, Patrick, I've mentioned it a couple of times, and you mentioned the woke argument. I mean, the Blade Runners, what they were doing to the cameras in London. Nothing's
culminated there yet in terms of whatever. You're right. We will have to wait. I'd be amazed.
The same situation.
I'd be amazed. I'd be amazed. You know, because you see things like the Black Lives Matter movement puts a huge amount of pressure on people, an unbelievable amount of pressure on people, especially at a corporate level, right? And you know, people don't want that in their lives. You know, they see that Extinction Rebellion and people like that can at times, I think, be quite. Well, whether they realise it or not, can be quite intimidating towards people. And I just find it remarkable that we live in a country right now where I think if you've got the right cause, that people feel as though they can't... if you feel as though if you go to a dinner party, right, you couldn't say, oh, actually, I do think maybe the Black Lives Matter movement is more about Marxism than it is about anything else, or, oh, you know what, I do actually really think that we're being a bit OTT about the climate. Then when you sit on a jury and you're in a jury room there, you're really going to feel, I think, unable to go, hang on a minute, this lot have just kicked the backside out of a bank. We can't have this. It's pressure.
Right. Look, I don't agree with that in this particular instance. I mean, we're talking about Extinction Rebellion. Extinction Rebellion themselves now, and remember, that's not us. We're not the climate party. Yeah. We're taking political action rather than sitting on the streets. So that's not us. But in terms of Extinction Rebellion, they have committed now to no longer take those kind of actions, blocking roads and sticking themselves to things and smashing stuff. And they had an event in London in April this year in which Keep Britain Tidy was there, supporting it as an official supporter, hardly the most terrorist or antagonistic organisation in the country. So I think no one's going to be any more scared of Extinction Rebellion supporters.
With respect, if I was HSBC, I don't know how you can keep the office there, because presumably the law now says if you've got these causes and you feel you're acting in these interests, you can do that to that building. And I think that's going to say, look, Ed, I do always appreciate our chats. We might not agree, but it's great to talk to you. Take care. All right, it's Ed Gemmell there. He's leader of the Climate Party. Thank you very, very much.